The Silver Bullet Silver Shield will return with its first pre-sale release of the new series with Warbird, Saturday, July 13th through sdbullion.com. The Warbird will be one of the most controversial coins of the year, as it boldly challenges the perceived reality of our paradigm. Heidi Wastweet's powerful sculpting includes a new method never used before in any other silver coin and is absolutely stunning. The Warbird will be minted by the ISO-certified Golden State Mint and released for distribution Monday, July 29th through sdbullion.com.
This is the Doc and Eric Dubin with the SD Weekly Metals and Markets. Joining us tonight as guest host is one of the leading voices in the silver community, Chris Duane of Don't Tread on Me and the Silver Bullet Silver Shield. Thanks for joining us tonight, Chris.
Yeah, it's great to be on here, guys. I visit your site every day, and you guys are probably the best resource of silver and gold out there in the market today, so I appreciate being on.
Well, it's great to have you. Why don't we start right off with the markets like normal? And it was a big week this week in the metals. After we saw the lows with last Friday's BLS report with the metals pretty unsurprisingly smashed on almost seemed like a holiday session with the day after the 4th of July and the BLS report and the smash that took silver under 19 into the mid-18s and gold back under 1200 to I think it was 1180 or 1190 was the bottom on Friday. But so both metals had a big week this week with a short squeeze developing Wednesday afternoon, really after recovery sessions Monday and Tuesday. The big squeeze to the upside was Wednesday after Bernanke sort of backed off on his tapering threats in his speech Wednesday afternoon. Both gold and silver were up pretty big on the day, and really the big move was the dollar was down I think 2 points at one point. I think it's one of the largest intraday moves that I've ever seen in the dollar index. Good news is both metals held on to the majority of their gains through today's close. In the access market close here, we had silver hanging on to a $20 handle, just closing just above it at 20.02, and gold closing at 12.85. Would have liked to seen it close back above 1,300 for the week, but it's still hanging in there as well. Why don't we start with you, Chris? What's your take on the metals? It sure was a positive trading action this week, especially in silver, but really in both metals. What's your take on the metals? Is it too early to call a bottom, or what? What do you see here?
No, I mean, my gut tells me that we're close to it. The summer doldrums, we don't have a lot of great market ahead of us until we get to late August, early September. But I never thought that they were going to blow below 26. And now that it's just exploded demand all over the world. I did a video called "The Most Stunning Development in Silver That I've Ever Seen," and into India in May were 920 tons of silver. That's more than the entire United States Mint Silver Eagle program even at this record pace so far this year in 1 month. I mean, that's an absolute stunning number. And then Zero Hedge reported that just the first 6 months of this year. Actually, I think 5 months, because I think it was up till May, China has imported 1,500 tons of gold. They only officially have 1,000 tons, and the big dog, the United States, only officially has 8,000 tons. I don't think anybody believes that the United States has 8,000 tons, and China is just consuming gold. And they're also, by the way, the largest gold producer. So, while the Wall Street may win a couple days, a couple trading sessions, a couple months below, production cost of global metals, that they're not going to be able to continue to do that. Things that cannot go on forever won't. I think that by the time we get to the end of the summer, early fall, we're going to see that the debt ceiling debate is going to come up again. We're going to see that Bernanke will not be able to taper off. We have a debt-based currency that must continue to accumulate, produce more debt every year than the debt and interest accrued the year before. It is inflate or die. The dollar will reach zero at some point, and I think that the downside risk of silver and gold at this point is infinitesimal to the upside potential of a currency collapse and not having real wealth.
Exactly. And one of the more interesting stories of this week, broken by Zero Hedge, I think Tuesday or Wednesday. It was actually one of our friend Turd over at TF Metals Report, one of his readers pointed out to the Tylers at Zero Hedge that the GOFO rate, or the gold forward interest rate, has gone negative. And it's been about 5 days now, for the first time since, I think it was like post-Lehman collapse, and only, the second or third time in the entire bull market, Eric?
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on the implications, The whole metals community has been making pretty big deal about it, and I think rightly so. What's your take on that, Eric?
It goes to show that the physical market is unbelievably tight. That also relates directly to what Chris was speaking about. When many of us, myself included, and I fully admit that I didn't expect $26 to bust on silver, but the fact that it was taken down by enormous and aggressive manipulation, the likes of which we probably haven't gone back all the way to the London Gold, just speaks to the explosion that we're seeing in physical demand everywhere. I mean, it has tapered, forgive the word, a bit here and there, largely at the hand of government aggressive actions in India in particular, which we could get back to that in a moment, because, I mean, I've been doing some numbers, and frankly, I think that the smuggling is going to surprise people at the level at which gold is coming into India under the radar, above and beyond the amazing story about silver that Chris mentioned. But, getting back to your question, the GOFO rate and also just backwardation in general is something that speaks specifically to the fact that there are dwindling inventories pretty much anywhere you look in the West, gold flowing to the East, a huge amount of interest in accumulating physical, and not enough to meet that demand. And as a result, gold in hand, so to speak, for the layman, in terms of a definitional description of what all of these terms mean in the near term, is more valuable than gold out further out. So when we have this really unusual event of the GOFO rate declining into negative, it's just a signal that this physical market is finally betraying the actions of the cartel over these many months, specifically starting since about October, but most aggressively stepping up since April. And it's very clear that they can't hide this anymore. I mean, anybody who has basic understanding of the futures markets, which is pretty much even now all the traders, see that signal and they begin to get scared, because for the better part of this period since October, the hedge fund hyenas and various other traders that have been piggybacking on the conducting that's being led by the Federal Reserve and JP Morgan and all those folks that are behind the cartel are now realizing that that game is no longer an easy trade. They have to be paranoid about any kind of short position that they'll put on. And on top of that, when you add the fact that the bullion banks themselves are now net long in gold and presumably in silver, it just sets the stage for what may in fact be a very rapid bounce back to say something like, believe it or not, gold 1,500 within 3 months, and then accelerating further in the fourth quarter, and silver leaping over 26, certainly by 3 months out time. But even if that scenario doesn't play out, I believe the bottom is firmly in. I wrote that story on Monday for SilverDoctors, where I was looking at these conditions beginning to establish themselves congruent with the fact that cartel patterns that are typical began to break down. We didn't see a back-to-back attack, and while initially this week gold and silver were not, running to the upside, they were showing behavior that was unusual. And then, if you look at specific stocks that the investment community, that is smart money in our space, pays a lot of attention to, you can also see the money flowing into those things as well. So the conditions for the bounce back were here. I think we are at the bottom, and even if we see another fit to push prices down because for whatever reason, maybe there would be a bullion bank that's on the verge of collapse or what have you, and the Fed and other central banks do something really aggressive just to push things down quickly, all that will do will just unleash even more physical demand, because around the world, most smart investors, even though they're not quoted in the mainstream media, will be able to see what's going on. And that's the take-home message that everybody should understand when you look at things like the GOFO rate going negative, because anybody who's worth their salt in the financial industry will look at that and say, well, gee, that's what that's signaling.
Right, and just launching off of your point about the GOFO rate going negative, Eric, and signaling that gold in bullion in volume is moving east, I wanted to touch on a point that came across around middle of the week, and we've joked often, King World News, that they're often over the top, and every story they ever publish is the biggest, most breaking story you've ever heard in your life. But this actually, this week, they actually had one, in my opinion, when they had William Kay on, who's the senior managing director and the guy who launched the Pacific Alliance Group in Hong Kong in the early 90s. Basically, it's a hedge fund in Hong Kong. He has a pretty large gold position. For our listeners who haven't read much about William K., he had a pretty fascinating letter back in May that's been pretty spot on. But what he came out this week in his King World News interview is he said that his hedge fund in Hong Kong is holding the gold bullion of the central banks of the world. He says they've seen abundance bank stamps, they've seen Federal Reserve stamps, that just like Eric was mentioning, that the GOFO rate is indicating that bullion is heading east and that the supply is extremely tight. William K. is actually stating that what SD readers and listeners likely know, but just confirming the fact of one of the first confirmations that I've seen that is in fact the case, that bullion that supposedly is on deposit in the New York Fed basement in New York City is actually flowing east. What are your thoughts, Chris, on that story? The obvious implications. Is it going to become a bigger story? Do we need actual photos before it becomes a bigger story? What's your thoughts, Chris?
No, it is a big story. It will get totally ignored in the mainstream media. I'm glad that there's whistleblowers and insiders and people that are speaking out, and I'm glad that there's an alternative media to help make people aware. But this is the natural, logical progression. The entire Western civilization's been built off of debt and war. I call it the debt and death paradigm. It goes all the way back to the discovery of the New World. During the Middle Ages, Europe was decimated, and all of the economic power was in China, was in India, was over in the East. And European settlers went to, had to go risk life and limb trying to find quicker trade routes with the real wealth. And it wasn't until the Western Europe discovered the New World and raped and pillaged that whole, those two continents of all their gold and silver and brought that back to Europe. That provided the capital for the Industrial Revolution. And the way I see what's going on today is that, all the real wealth is being generated out of Asia. This is just a karmic cycle that the wealth needs to go back to the wealth producers. The United States, what do we produce? We produce bombs, donuts, and porn. So we until we start drastically changing the way that we live and, have the means and necessary need to do that, nothing's going to change. And until then, there's going to be a collective drain of those wealth producers out there who know real value. It's going to, all that gold and silver and, oil. I mean, China is now the largest investor in Saudi Arabia. When it comes to oil production, they're the largest investor in Africa and all the natural resources there. The world is moving away from us, and the Anglo-American Empire is going to be on the outside looking in, because all we've provided is debt and death over the last 100 years. We haven't been a good leader in the world. We haven't been spreading the Constitution. We spread debt for the banks and death for the military-industrial complex. I think that this is a real story, and this isn't something that we need to be victims of. We don't have to be the victim of the fate of nations. Every individual can walk away just the same way that the Chinese and the Indians and the Russians and the Brazilians and the Indonesians and the rest of the world are walking away by dumping the dollar. You dump the dollar on real assets, real skills, and real friends, and you'll be relatively okay versus the rest of the world.
Well, before we let you go, Chris, adding on to that on the debt and death, this interview is conducted Friday night, but it's posted on Saturday, so we have some big news you're releasing Saturday, so why don't you go ahead and let our listeners know about that?
Yeah, after much trial and tribulation, releasing the fifth coin in the Silver Bullet, Silver Shield series with a new mint, the ISO-certified Golden State Mint. This design is called the Warbird, mainly because of the issues that we were just talking about. It is sculpted by Heidi Wastweet. This is her fourth coin that's been designed with me. And, I'm very happy to say that SD Bullion is carrying it. You guys have actually been very, very big supporters and encouraging me into continuing this series. And we have a lot of good stuff coming. I actually have 10 releases over the next 10 weeks if we can keep the manufacturing capacity and if there's enough demand for it, including 4 1-ounce designs, a 2-ounce proof, a 5-ounce proof, 10th ounce fractional, quarter-ounce fractional, half-ounce fractional, and believe it or not, even some gold. I never thought I would do it, but once I saw this design that Heidi and I have been working on, I knew we had to make a gold piece out of it. So, we have a lot of good stuff coming. SD Bullion is one of the 4 retailers in the United States and Canada that are supporting the Silver Bullet, Silver Shield series, and I appreciate on the show tonight.
That was great to have you, Chris. Going forward into next week, we'll keep our eyes on the GOFO rate to see if it extends negative in through the week into 6 or 7 days, as well as if silver can hang on to that $20 and gold can get back above $1,300. It should be a pretty interesting week. So for the Doc, Eric Dubin, and Chris Duane, thanks for tuning in to the SD Weekly Metals and Markets.